A lot of times when we're running battles in our 5e RPGs, we want to kind of shake things up a little bit. We don't want every battle that we're running to feel the same. And there's one way that we can make our 5e RPG battles really feel fun and interesting and offer a lot of advantages, is to drop in this idea of an interactive monument. So the way an interactive monument works, it's an object that's in the world that has some kind of effect on the battle in one direction. And we're going to talk about all the details in this video about how that exactly works. But basically, there's an object in this battle that the characters can manipulate. They can do stuff with it, and also is affecting the battle in some other way. Today, we're going to take a look at one particular monument that I'm calling Chernobog's Well. You can see an image. Chernobog's Well is that thing in the upper left corner of that image. And we're going to talk about how we can design a fun interactive monument for a game that we could drop into a battle and give us some tools and tips and tricks for building your own, getting your own ideas, and things that you want to do and things that you want to avoid. So the whole reason that we want to have a monument like this is that we want to shake up a bigger battle. So you don't need to have a monument in every small battle you're running. You don't need to have a monument all the time. But if you're doing what I like to refer to as a set piece battle, i.e. something where you have kind of a neat display or a really good map, or something where you're getting into the more tactical form of combat, then having some kind of monument or monuments, it doesn't have to be just one, it could be 4. I'm notorious for evil pillars, that I put evil pillars in our games, and those pillars are worse than monsters because you can't silence them, you can't stun them, you can't banish them. You have to go over and physically dork with the pillar to get it to stop doing whatever horrible thing it's doing. So the first thing you have to ask is, well, what exactly does the monument do? What effect on its own, just sitting there, what effect is it having on the rest of the battle? And you want to work from the story of the monument. What is this thing doing? In this case of Chernobog's Well, we have a great big evil kind of summoning circle that's been sitting there for a while, and it's leaking primordial bad liquids out the side, as you can see. It's got these 3 pylons. We're going to talk about why there are 3 pylons. It's got these 3 pylons that are channeling energy into the well, that are drawing it out, and it is having an effect on the evil of the area. In this case, it's literally pulling undead out of the earth and then empowering those undead. So that's one big question. What does it do? And what does it do in the world? Before we even think about what mechanics we're going to put onto it, why is it there, and what is it doing just in the fiction? And then we have to ask a question, okay, well, how do you disable it? What do you do to get rid of this thing? Does it just sit there and you can't do anything about it? That's not really a lot of fun. You definitely want to have a way for people to be able to go and manipulate it. That's the whole point of having a monument you can manipulate. And then we have a bunch of considerations that we need to keep in mind while we're designing our monument. One, it needs to be fun. Like, you don't want to put something in place and have all the players go, oh God, another one of these stupid monuments we got to go dork with. Okay, let's all go over and screw with the monument so that we're not all getting our asses kicked. You want to make sure that there's something interesting about it, that both in the story and the fiction and the way you describe it, but also in the mechanics that it has. It should empower characters, not take away from characters. So one of the ways to do that is to make sure you don't have to dork with it. You don't want to set up a monument like you gotta fix this monument if you're gonna stop this battle. Now, you can break that rule if you decide that the core thing of the battle, if the goal of the battle is disabling the monument, and maybe, for example, you just have waves of skeletons that are coming up. Every round, 6 more skeletons come out of the ground, and until you destroy that monument, you're just gonna keep facing more and more and more skeletons. And basically, fighting the skeletons isn't the issue, disabling the monument is the issue. You could definitely do a battle like that, and it would still be fun. But a lot of times if you have a monument and it's just part of a bigger battle, you don't want to require that the characters have to destroy the monument in order to succeed, because you're basically creating a situation where you really only have one way out. And you want to give the players lots of options. Is it worth my time to go screw with the monument, or should I just deal with these monsters? Or how about you go screw with the monument and I'll deal with the monsters? Like, you want to give them some tactical interest in whether they're doing that. And you can only do that if you make sure that dealing with the monument isn't necessarily required. Another thing is you don't want the monument to take agency away from the characters. I'm going to talk specifically about a really cool mechanic that I really like, that gives an option to the players to say, do you want to spend your whole round dorking with this thing, or do you want to do it quickly and recklessly and still have an action that you can take? And that's that idea of like giving more options to the players about what they want to do. So it's not like, oh, thank you so much for giving me this awesome character sheet with all of these spells and all of these powers and all these things you can do, but all I can do is go over there and do skill checks. You don't want to put a situation like that where people feel like you're taking away their character. They're taking away the stuff that they've got for their character. And I think the reckless manipulation is a way to deal with that. One big important point is tell them how it works. You can do this through the eyes of the character by saying characters who are trained in Arcana or religion might be able to look at Chernobog's well, and they know how it works. You can look at the well. Because you're trained in Arcana, this is a real good trick in general. Anytime you want to give information to the players, you can just give it to them instead of making them do skill checks, specifically if it's required information. But do it through the skills that they are trained in. So those who are trained in religion or Arcana can immediately look at Chernobog's well, and they can see that it's been there a while, it's leaking this primordial ooze, it's the source of the power that the undead are fueled with here. And those pylons in particular are the ones that are channeling the energy into the well. The pylons need to be destroyed in order for the well to be taken care of. Tell them how it works. Don't hide it, because you don't want to have it like it takes half the battle to even figure out how to dork with the monument. And now you just know right away, this is how you can go dork with a monument in order to get it done. So what are some of the things that we can actually have the monument do mechanically? So we talked about like you want to make sure that it fits inside of the story and that works well. But what does the monument actually do? Well, some easy ones, and these are just a handful of easy ones. You don't necessarily have to do just these. There's lots of different things you can do. But an easy one is it adds damage to monsters. In this case, in Chernobog's well, it added an extra D6 of necrotic damage onto all of the attacks of all of the monsters on the board. And the monsters in many cases were very low challenge rating skeletons, but I also had some mid challenge rating veterans, and I had one really powerful undead, and all of them got extra necrotic damage on their attacks. And the players could see, because you're trained in religion, you can tell that Chernobog's well, it's what's giving these guys this extra damage. If you destroy the well, it won't destroy the undead, but it will get rid of their extra damage they're doing. So tell them how it works. You can add damage shields. Again, I did this as well. If you strike one of these skeletons, you will have necrotic damage that gets channeled back to you. Not a lot. Maybe only it's at 3 points of damage. I did 1d6 or 3 on the static of damage that's going back to the characters that are hitting him. It has a tendency of affecting melee characters more than it affects ranged attackers and stuff like that. And it affects characters who do more attacks more often than those if you have it where it's actually doing damage back. You could come up with some kind of mechanism of like a feedback loop that when you strike this with a ranged attack, you are struck with psychic feedback for striking it. You could have something like that too if you wanted to do it, if you wanted to affect ranged attackers too. Another one, which is a big one, is it gives monsters advantage. If you have lower challenge rating monsters, again, like those skeletons, you could say all of the skeletons are getting advantage on their attacks because Chernobog's well is active. When it is no longer active, they lose advantage. You probably don't want to give it to all of your big monsters because advantage is such a big improvement. It's such a big power that if you give it to everybody, that'd be a problem. But you could certainly say the skeletons, the low challenge rating monsters, they're getting advantage because Chernobog's well is active. Then you can do some other things. I didn't do these when I ran it, but one of the things you could do is like maybe you do put some really big, scary monsters that hit really hard, have tons of hit points and high AC. But if you get rid of Chernobog's well, they are destroyed. They are bound by Chernobog's well. They came from Chernobog's well. Imagine like fire elementals. So what if you had like 4 fire elementals that are there in this battle, which are, for a low tier 2, like level 5 to 7-ish game, fire elementals are pretty powerful because they're CR5s. So you could have these fire elementals that are going around and they're shaking up the back line. But if you get rid of Chernobog's well, you can get rid of the fire elementals. If you do too much of this, if you do too many, like if you did 4 fire elementals would be too big, but maybe 2 is not quite so bad, then the nice thing is, again, you don't want to force the characters to have to deal with the well. But if they do, they'll take care of those fire elementals. So ask yourself if you're putting so much on the monument that now you just made it that you have to deal with the monument. So instead of just having to deal with the monument, they could also banish the monster and get rid of it with one go too. That way they have a choice. They don't have to get rid of the other one. Another one which could be kind of interesting is limiting healing or resistance. If you have like a fire monument, the fire monument gets rid of any of your elemental resistance or any of your fire resistance or immunities. So if you happen to be resistant to fire, the heat of this thing is burning through your resistances, which means other fire monsters are able to do full damage unless you get rid of the monument, in which case you get your resistance back. One other way that you could do is look at spell effects. If we think about spells are a really interesting pile of mechanics that we can dive into to add effects into lots of different things. You can tie them to items, you can tie them to monsters, you can tie them to monuments. You can take a look at something like fog cloud and say, this thing is pouring a fog cloud out that's making it impossible for you to see anybody that's more than 10 feet away from you. And if you destroy the monument, then that fog cloud goes away and then you can see everybody again. But if you want to have a whole bunch, if you want hundreds of different things they can tie to a monument, look at spells. Spells give you hundreds of little bundles of mechanics that you can tie to all kinds of things, including monuments. So take a look at spells. So how do you disable it? One of the things we want to do is we don't want the monument to be required. We want to have a bunch of different options for the characters and how they deal with the monument. You don't want to have this like, you have to do X, Y, and Z. So one of the things I really like to do is, because these monuments are often have a powerful religious or arcane sort of connection, is that you can do religion and arcana checks to disable them. I would often say you have to be adjacent to it to be able to do it. So like, you can't just do it from across the way. You have to go run over there and get next to it and do stuff. And that you could do not for free, but like, you don't have to burn any of your abilities in order to mess with it if you're doing a standard arcana or religion check. You might also say, yeah, you can use an athletics check to grab one of those pylons and rip it out of the ground. You don't need to do your arcana checks. It's not just arcana religion. Maybe there is an opportunity for a thief to get in there using thieves tools and disable, like, get that crystal. If I can go over with thieves tools. And a lot of times, if you know how the monument works in the world, the players will come up with ways that they can manipulate it. If you describe what it's like in the world, the players can come up with ways that they can go and screw with it. And this is a big difference between like the idea of skill challenges and a monument like this, is that a skill challenge usually has definitions of what skills you can do or what skills you can use in order to accomplish something. In this case, we're saying, no, we know what it looks like in the world, and we have ideas in our head about how the characters might be able to manipulate it, but they can come up with ideas. They can think up different skills that they can use. They can think up different abilities that they've got, stuff like that. So we want to leave it open for them to be able to do stuff like this. Then we also want to say that maybe if you have certain spells or abilities that they auto succeed. So instead of rolling a check, and if you say like it's a DC 15 intelligence arcana check or intelligence religion check while you're adjacent to it, and it takes 3 successes to do it because there's 3 pillars. We'll talk about this. Like, you have physical pillars that are inside the monument that tell the characters and show the characters and show the players, this is how many successes need to occur before you're able to disable this thing. But we don't just say it's 3 successes. We actually show them. This is the pillar idea. If you have 4 pillars, it takes 4 successes in order to get rid of them. That is certainly an option. So one of the things, this is my dirty trick that ensures you don't take agency away from the players and don't take agency away from the characters, and you let them manipulate the object, is this thing that I call disabling recklessly. And the idea here is, instead of having to use your full action to go over there and rip one of the pillars out, you can do so just quick and dirty. And the way is to say you can do it as a bonus action. However, if you fail on the check, instead of if you fail, you just fail, it doesn't work. If you fail on the check when you do so recklessly, you could take damage for the fact that you failed. So you could say it is a DC 15 athletics check to rip one of these pylons out of the ground. And you could do so as a bonus action, but when you try to do it as a bonus action, if you fail, you're going to take 3d6 necrotic damage. You're going to take 10 points of necrotic damage. How much damage should you do? Do it like 1d8 for every other level. So if you think about every even level, if they're level 2, it does a d8. If they're level 4, it does 2d8. And so on. As you go up the ladder, it does that much damage to them if they fail on a check while they're ripping something free. And then they have an option. Do they want to do it recklessly? Are they willing to take the damage? Or they say, no, I need to be careful, so I'm going to use my whole action to do it. And then you could say, okay, well, what if they decide that they have cool spells and abilities that can manipulate this thing? What if they cast Shatter on this thing and they want to blow away the pylons with a casting of Shatter? That would work completely. So they get to auto succeed by using a spell Shatter. My general rule of thumb is you get to auto succeed if you're burning up a resource to do so. If you're burning a spell slot, if you're casting Remove Curse, if you're casting Dispel Magic, if you're casting Shatter, even channeling, if you're like, I'm going to overcharge it by blasting it with a lightning bolt. You could blast it with a lightning bolt. And you might say, like, if they're using a spell that is a big spell for them, maybe they get 2 successes instead of just 1. Maybe they can aim them if they move to a certain spot, maybe moving into a dangerous position to be able to blast 2 of the pylons with lightning. You say, sure, you'll be able to do so. And maybe you say, like, you got to overcharge your lightning. Maybe you throw another. You'll definitely be able to disable 1. If you make a DC 15 intelligence arcana check on top of it, you could disable 2. So you can play with this. There are all sorts of things. And you can improvise these ideas that you, and talking with the player and coming up with ideas, you offering deals, having them put their characters at risk, having them use resources, and letting them manipulate this thing in order to disable the monument. That's a really good trick to do it. So that's the idea behind using an interactive monument in a battle. It's a really fun way to get the characters moving around the battlefield. It shakes up the battle in a different way. It works really well for set piece fights or larger combats that you're running. And it's a neat way to make each combat kind of unique and interesting, giving lots of options to the characters for what they want to do, how they want to manipulate it, where they want to spend their attention, and gives the players lots of interesting tactical choices. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, you can subscribe to the Sly Flourish newsletter for more RPG-related tips like this sent directly to your inbox. You can join the Sly Flourish Patreon and get access to all kinds of exclusive features, dedicated Discord channels, all different kinds of things. And you can pick up any of my books at the Sly Flourish bookstore. All of the links for those are in the show notes below. Thank you all very much. Have a great day and get out there and play an RPG.